Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode as we are back in round two, part two of the My Favorite LJN tournament. So if the first episode of round two was any sort of foreshadowing, this second round is going to be extremely difficult. Now, generally, I like to say that the first and second rounds are, I don't want to say easy, especially depending on a lot of the matches. But based on the sort of figures you're going to go through, more times than not, yeah, a lot of the matches you can pretty much have at least a good general idea of what figure you think you might choose beforehand. After round two, once you get into round three, you've had a couple of rounds of looking at the figures. So by the time you get into round three, round four, at that point, it really becomes more and more difficult to choose your winner to move on to the next round. But that last video or round two, part one, my God, it just seems like all the matchups were like semi-final type matchups. So it was a great video for that in that respect, but it also made it extremely hard to make a choice. And man, I was hoping that some of these videos would have kicked back to 35 minutes, but it looks like we're still hovering around 45 minutes per episode, which isn't good for me because view count is dwindling further and further, or spiraling further and further downward. I don't know. I think the other videos I make pretty much do, from my channel, do adequately. It's just that the tournament videos aren't as much of a success as I would like. But, I mean, come on. 45-minute videos every day of the week. I would be lying if I said I was shocked. The hope is that the videos would do better, but I think if they were 15-minute videos, yeah, I think at 15, 20-minute videos every couple of days, I think I'd probably be having about 700 views per episode, to be honest. But it just happens that filming every single day and 45 minutes per episode, there's not many people that can keep up with that type of workload, that type of view. So, but we're gonna keep going the way we have to at least close out the end of 2024. Like I said, by the time we get into 2025, I am gonna draw back some. So I'm still gonna put out, regular videos several times a week, but it probably won't be every day. It might be every other day. Sometimes it might be every 3 days. Sometimes it might even be every 4 days. It all depends on what's going on. I am planning a Galoob tournament in 2025 to somewhere at the beginning, so that might push me back to the everyday scenario, but more on that will follow as the months progress and we get closer to those dates, closer to that happening. But let's dig into today's tournament videos and see what our matchups. And the first matchup is going to feature Crush, and he is going to do battle against Macho Man. Next matchup is going to feature Fuji, and he does battle against Shawn Michaels. We're going to see from Robert Jackson, Jim Neidhart, purple, and he is going to do battle against Rick Martel. And last matchup is from Mr. Perfect. Okay, that's a T. So Ram Treasure is Mr. Perfect. And he will square off against another Rick Martel. And that one comes from Wrestling Rider. I would say that I need to mix in these names a little bit better, but shoot, man. Rick Martel from Wrestling Rider and the Rick Martel original LJN. I mean, they don't even sit anywhere near each other on the shelves, so when they were drawn completely different times. So that's just very random, which is again what we're doing for random drawing, right? So guys, let's go ahead and get these figures pulled, and we will begin in a small second. All right, let's get her done. So first matchup was from Random Treasures. It featured Demolition Crush as he squares off against original LJN of Macho Man. And we will begin with said Macho Man figure. So, let's get the basics out of the way. Macho Man, my number 3 all-time favorite wrestler. Someone I grew up watching. Someone I absolutely loved on the freaking mic. After wrestling, he went into commentating. He kind of flip-flopped back and forth between commentating and wrestling. I mean, there were guys who did that all the time. Jerry Lawler did that constantly. Mr. Perfect on occasion. So, you know, it's fine, right? So, everything about Macho Man was fantastic. And to be honest, because I stopped watching wrestling in like the late 90s, 97, 98, the last time I became aware of Macho Man was in, what was it, 2002 Spider-Man. What did he play? Like Bonesaw, I think, the name of his character. And that was the last I ever saw of Randy Savage. And I don't know, man. For like the longest time, I thought he had passed away. Now, obviously, over the last few years of collecting and kind of learning about a lot of people's deaths, you know, when they've occurred over the years, and learning that Randy Savage actually died. I think he died in a car accident in like 2011, and he actually lived a lot longer than I would have initially expected. So I don't know why I didn't hear about him over the years, but and you would have think that, see, 2011. Okay, 2011, I would have been in Afghanistan, so that would have explained why I probably wouldn't have read about him or heard any news stories or anything like that. But you think on AOL News or something, I would have read something about an absolute hero and legend that Macho Man Randy Savage was, that it would have been like all over. When certain people pass, like when the day comes and Hulk Hogan passes along, you would think that it's going to be worldwide news, like historically popular type of news, like the death of Michael Jackson or something, you know. So I just want you guys to know that Randy Savage himself meant a lot. Still to this day means a lot to me. His LJN figure, though, leaves much to be desired. And for those folks who grew up, who were kids in the 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, and had LJN and played with these figures, and you love this figure, I'm sorry. If I am bashing on a beloved figure for you, but this is not a good figure. Now, there are so many Randy Savage figures I get today. Big Rubber Guys comes out with a similar figure to this. The figure collection store came out with their Hasbro style figure that comes out with figures like this. So you do get Randy Savage in like this exact look, or his orange trunks with stars, etc. And you get a bunch of different variants: pink trunks, orange trunks, green trunks. It don't matter. Mattel Retros comes out with their different variations, etc. I look at this figure and then I look at, you know, Sting Series 1 Galoob, which is basically the same figure. This is not a playable wrestling figure. As a kid, you would literally have to kind of like go over the top type of punch type of deal. And that is not fun. That is not a fun, enjoyable, playful figure. I mean, is it the worst thing ever? Me right now, if you said, hey, sit down, have a wrestling match, play with it, of course I would make use out of this. I mean, it's doable. You're not talking Jimmy Snuka. It is a playable, serviceable figure when you need to. But it's just not a go-to figure. Does he win this tournament? Not even close. Is this a legitimate first-round elimination figure? Of course. Now, could a figure like this make it to the third, fourth round? Absolutely. It's all about matchups. he does go up against Crush. I always say that Ram Treasure is all about continuing on the nostalgia and the feel of 1980s era LJNs, right? So all the characters are based out of, or theoretically, 19 eras wrestlers. So when I think about getting guys like Mr. Perfect, when I think about getting guys like the upgraded Brutus Beefcake, when I think about getting Demolition Crush, I'm kind of looking at the shelf. The Rockers fall on that list. Tito Santana, which is just a prototype, but yeah, that could fall on that list. The Bushwhackers, again, initially they were supposed to be released with LJN. They were on the back of the Black Card. And I've been talking about wanting them to start diving into 90s era wrestling. More importantly, looking at what Hasbro released. But look at the characters that Ram Treasures has released. You don't necessarily have to look at them as 1980s based LJN figures. You could look at them as being Hasbro 1990s era characters that were blown up to LJN rubber form. Series 8, blue Mr. Perfect. You got a blue Mr. Perfect, a blue singlet Mr. Perfect, okay? You got that. You want the Rockers? Guess what? Series 2 Hasbro, got it. You just got your Berserker in. Series 2 Demolition Crush, Hasbro, bam. So, as you go up and down Ram Treasure's roster of figures, yes, a lot of these names you're looking at were big stars in the 1980s, whether they were AWA wrestlers, popularized in NWA / WCW, etc. But you can look, if you're like someone like me, growing up in the 90s, era of Hasbro, you can look at these figures and be like, hey, these are characters that I grew up watching. These are characters that, I respected and enjoyed their personas, their wrestling matches, etc. And Crush, they blew this one out of the park. I think all of Demolition figures are blown out of the park. They're all fantastic figures. The only downside with the Axe original is the whole hand up, the whole Jesse Ventura thing. And when Ram Treasures did their Smash, they just mirrored it with the whole, which that kind of ruins it. I would have liked if Smash initially had a whole different pose. Even Crush, because his hands are like, right? If his hands were like this, yeah, they're just up and out, but they're not like fighting position. So that right there, I could say is a downside, but take that away. He does come with accessory. I didn't bring out the mask. Don't need to. It is just an overall incredible piece. I do think Macho Man, legitimately, this figure would have potentially lasted longer with the right competition. And I'm not blowing smoke. I do think he could have made it 4th round, maybe even further, with the right competition. But come on. This is an absolute no-brainer. Crush will not ever lose in a battle like this to Macho Man. Macho Man original. This, among LJN original figures, you're probably looking at maybe a number 40 best figure out of 72 or so figures that LJN came out with. So it's literally a middle of the rotation type of figure. It's nice. It's good character. Solid here, but pose just overall kills it. So Crush, to me, absolute no-brainer. Easy answer on this one. Alright. Next battle is going to feature original Mr. Fuji going up against Random Treasures Shawn Michaels. And I kind of like these matchups where you're having original LJNs going up against a custom. Because I have so many customs, because the customs are probably, 3-1 or something like that. Yeah, I'd say about 3-1, 3.5-1 ratio. Sometimes you have to have custom on custom, custom on original. It's when you start having original on original, which sucks because the ratio just isn't there. We'll start with Mr. Fuji. You guys know this figure fell off the shelf because the LJN stands suck. We're not talking about that though. But it's kind of annoying because I'm not gonna take the stick out of his hand, the cane out of his hand. It is what it is. This is a solid piece. And I was looking at this, I'm like, he's Batman's Penguin. That's the first glance I get. And I'm surprised I have not seen anybody turn this into DC's Penguin. You literally have the Penguin suit already. uh, but I don't know. I just think that that'd be just too much whitewashing where, you're taking an Asian. What is he? Is he Hawaiian? What is Mr. Fuji? Is he Hawaiian? Yeah, I think he is. I don't think he's Samoan. I think he is I think he is Hawaiian. I could be wrong. I gotta look that up. Again, there's just so many wrestling facts, and whether or not you knew these facts before, it becomes irrelevant because over time you just forget it, man. But I'm gonna say his nationality is Hawaiian. But of course, he always plays a Japanese wrestler, Japanese manager, whatever, like what they did with Yokozuna. Rodney, I know he can't remember his whole name. I think Rodney was actually his middle name, but he is Samoan, comes from a Samoan family, and when they branded him in WWF, they branded him as this Japanese sumo wrestler. Shoot, man, for my entire life, I always thought he was Japanese. I had no reason to doubt it. I literally did not know Yokozuna was not Japanese, and probably until 2022-ish, somewhere on that time frame, man. It's crazy. But I love the LJN managers. Outside of Elizabeth, which is nothing more than a Barbie doll, I think the managers probably are some of the better figures out there. And I mean, Jimmy Hart is a very small figure, but Jimmy Hart is an excellent figure. He's small in real life. Yeah, you could look at Slick. I mean, Slick is not a good figure. I love the three-piece suit and everything that Slick wears. Nice hat, awesome suit, good colors, details, but he's a very small, tiny figure, thin body, thin hands, but Freddie Blassie is a killer figure. Lou Albano is a killer figure. Heenan is a killer figure. Fuji is a killer figure. So the managers, they just did so exceptionally well. None of the managers are going to win the tournament, with asterisk. There is one particular manager, custom, that I don't know. I could be leaning towards that figure towards the end. It is possible. So nothing is written in stone as of yet. This is so good. I look at these figures and I really don't know, to be honest. I've always wanted, ever since I started collecting LJNs, and I became huge on collecting LJN customs, getting the rockers as freaking LJN. Obviously, you can't go back and get original LJN rockers because, well, they don't exist. They haven't existed in 35 years now? So, yeah, you're going to have to go the custom route. And usually that means taking, looking at the figures, I don't know, Greg Valentine, for example, and probably Bruce Beefcake or something. I'm just throwing out a couple figures, I don't know. And calling them Marty and Shawn Michaels. So, luckily, they didn't do that. They got legitimate rocker figures. And you look at this head, that is a Series 2 Hasbro Shawn Michaels head sculpt, okay? That's his face. That's pretty much his hair. So, all of this talk about like, oh yeah, Berserker came out in 91. We finally have an upscaled Hasbro Berserker figure. I'll go back. Random Treasures is already giving you Hasbro upscaled figures. You just gotta look hard at what you're getting. Like I said, You look at Berserker, you look at his head, you look at a Hasbro Berserker, literally the exact same head mold. Look at your Series 2 jumper, Shawn Michaels. Exact friggin' head. So, Rockers, if LJN was continuing on, I don't think they probably would have had anything in the 89 line, but they probably could have had something in 1990. And that's possible. They could have come out in 89. So, AWA Midnight Rockers, already tag team champions, superstars, signed with WWF. I think the same day that they were, first day on the job, I think they were in a bar fight, immediately fired. Welcome to the company. I don't know how long it was. I think maybe like a year later, Vince McMahon brought them back to the company, and they were treated the same way that Joe Madden treated Aroldis Chapman. Anybody that does not know that reference, 2016, Joe Madden, manager of the Cubs. The Cubs acquired Aroldis Chapman, left-handed closer from the Yankees, and freaking Madden rode Chapman's left arm all the way to the playoffs and through the playoffs. It pretty much almost cost us the World Series. I don't blame Aroldis Chapman. I mean, the man was severely overused. Probably used until his arm fell off. And when you're throwing 10,000 miles an hour, yeah, you're used over excessively, you're risking injuries. So, and you look at the Rockers, and every single major event you could think of, WrestleManias, Survivor Series, Royal Rumbles, I mean, these guys were everywhere. They were always highlighting those tag team matchups, and they were always winning. So, why did they not get the opportunities to win the title belts? Except in Indiana in 1990, and that's why I went with this color scheme, because while wearing these outfits, at an untelevised event, they did defeat Hart Foundation for their titles. I believe it was it Halloween Day or a day before Halloween? Again, details. Details were important, but man, it's just too much facts to memorize. But they won. And then they said, nope, you know what? We changed our mind. We don't want you to have the belts. Rewind time. Didn't happen. It sucks. So it's the only time the Rockers technically ever won the tag team titles, and it didn't count. Now, luckily, Marty Jannetty and like 1, 2, 3 Kid had a tag team run. Marty Jannetty was Intercontinental Champion. Shawn Michaels, multiple Intercontinental Champion runs. One of the greatest Intercontinental Champions ever. One of the greatest heavyweight champions ever. Tag team champion with Diesel. So, I mean, he's had his tag team title runs as well. The fact that it never happened with Marty, and the fact that the two of them never held the titles together in WWF was an absolute waste. And he's got kind of like that Freddie Blassie pose as well. So, Marty Jannetty and Shawn, they're just mirrors of each other. Freddie Blassie and Marty Jannetty have the right arm up, so they're more similar in terms, but this was a lot closer than you might think, but absolutely I have to give it to Shawn Michaels. One, I absolutely love Shawn Michaels, probably my number 4, maybe my number 5 all-time favorite wrestler. If Legion of Doom can't be classified as my all-time favorite tag team, the Rockers have to be. And as a legitimate wrestler compared to Fuji, yes, Fuji was a wrestler, but here he's just a manager. Next matchup is going to feature... Alright, so... this is a tough one. It's going to feature from Robert Jackson, Purple Pants, Jim Neidhart, as he squares off against Rick Martel. So, I will say this. Rick Martel is a top 20 figure. With that being said, when I did my 11 through 20 list, he was not on that list. He deserved to be on the top 20. He was not on the top 20, but that's only because I skipped him. If you guys remember back behind me, I used to have my my DVD shelves, and I also had some DVD shelves over here where I kind of had the figures, right? And they used to sit on the shelves like so, you know, one behind the other. So that's how they used to be displayed. And when I was looking at the shelves and you had Strike Force side by side, I guess Rick was too far back or something and I missed him, so all I saw was Tito. So when I was pulling out the figures, I omitted him. Should be a top 20 figure, so for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to say he's a top 20 figure. Jim Neidhart, and in my opinion, is a top 10, not even a top 20, but a top 10 LJN figure. Once upon a time, right after I did my very first LJN tournament, about 10 episodes later or so, I came out and I did my top 10 least favorite LJNs, followed by my top 10 most favorite LJNs. And he was number 8. So for the last 2.5 plus years, I have been going by that listing, that 1 through 10 list. Now, if I did that list again today, would they still be in the same order? Honestly, I don't think so. I thought about this several days ago. I thought about remaking that video, and I thought about laying out the figures. This is my initial layout, 1 through 10. Today, this is how I would list these figures, and I would put some of my spares, like let's say I had Big John Studd. A Big John Studd was first. He would be over here, right? And then I would take like a second Big John Studd. Let's say he was number 3. I would have that second Big John Studd kind of sit in the second row at number 3, hypothetically, if I chose him as my 3rd favorite, etc. So, and that way you could basically see how I first chose them out and how I look at them today. Because a top 10 list could be made, and you could come downstairs 5 minutes later, make the exact same list, and have it completely different. I've said that all the time. If this was simply a top 10 versus a top 20 based on that, yeah, it's a very easy decision. But ooh, I don't know. This it is really more difficult. It's because what Rob did with this figure is just so good. The paint scheme is just so fresh. And it's clean lines. You don't see no brush strokes or anything like that, right? And you look at the pink and purple pants figures I got back from him, and like I said, look at how eye-popping the black is. You put them online or whatnot, right? You're gonna be able to look at the pictures and be like, yeah, that's an obvious customization. For me personally, I don't give a crap if somebody repaints a figure. Like, if you list a original blackstrap Andre the Giant, and you touch him up, and you got the black paint looking like this, but you leave the bottom of the feet so that you can still read the stencil, right? And you're charging me $300 for it. Are you telling me that figure is now worth less than $300? Because you repainted it and it's completely filled in and looks brand new, compared to if you left it alone and it was like 30% missing paint, and at that point it would have been worth like $500. I mean, that's makes no sense. So no, if you need to touch it up, make it clean, I'm perfectly fine with that. I've never been one of those guys to sit there and complain because, it's been repainted or touched up or filled in. Especially if it's filled in or, filled in the right way. So, we will move back to Rick Martel. I've never been a fan of Jim Neidhart. And I don't think it's so much I've not been a fan of his. I guess I just never saw enough of Jim Neidhart growing up. I mean, he was there. He was around. So, I mean, I obviously had to have seen him somewhat. but I try to memorize like individual matches, and I just don't remember any. But like I vaguely remember Royal Rumble matches or battle royals that he participated in. So like you've seen him around, and you've seen him in his little neon color schemes, kind of same color scheme that you would see Owen Hart in. When he and like Coco Beware formed High Energy. And then later on, when the New Heart Foundation came together, Jim and Owen, they'd have like that very similar color scheme going on. The Rocket, Owen and Jim and whatnot. So think Hasbro Series 5, Jim Neidhart. That type of color scheme, right? Like, I remember that, but I just don't have those memories. Rick Martel, I don't know anything about Rick Martel's Strike Force. I know a lot about Rick Martel, the model, because I watched him as a bad guy all the time. I watched him in the Royal Rumble. I watched him break Royal Rumble records for time in ring. Of course, that's since been eliminated. He's been beaten by other wrestlers over the years, of course. But he held the title for like 50-something minutes, almost an hour. He's had his matches with Shawn Michaels, the Pretty Boy matchup, where they both were managed by Sherry Martel, and neither one could hit each other in the face because they were both pretty boys or whatever. I thought that was adorable. That was fun. I still say one of the most boring matches ever was him and Jake Roberts together with the blindfold match. But yeah, I know Rick Martel because I remember him. Not to mention, he was already a super megastar, pretty much like, your face of the brand type of deal with the AWA as your heavyweight champion. So, I mean, the man's had success pretty much everywhere he's gone. And I've always complained about Tito Santana and the way that his arms are so super exposed, right? And Rick Martel pretty much has the same thing. But where Tito Santana's arms are like way down here, right? At least Rick Martel's arms are elevated. Not only are they higher, but they're facing up. So when you come at the wrestler, you could throw a good punch, and the left arm is even better. Plus, he's actually got a legitimate body slam pose, right? And that's what I covet. I am going to go with Jim Neidhart. This was tough. This really was a tough one. I thought I might go with Rick Martel. I really thought Rick Martel was going to win this one. But, like I said, man, this figure, it was just painted too well. And I do value the Jim Neidhart LJN a lot more than Rick Martel. Number 8 on my list. Is he still number 8? He could be number 10. He could be number 12 now. I don't know. But once upon a time, I would say number 8, where I'd probably put him anywhere between 18 to 22. So that extra emphasis, that helped me make a final determination. Last matchup. But that is not the end of Rick Martel, because from Wrestling Writer, we do once again see the model Rick Martel as he squares off against oh God, that was right in the back of my throat. What the heck was I saying? Rick Martel against Mr. Perfect. Sorry. I have to cough, but I'm trying to keep it down. So, because I've already said a lot about Rick Martel. Sorry, gotta clear my throat. I'm not gonna talk about this particular figure a lot. Everything I pretty much needed to say, I've already said about the last figure. I think it's because I'm talking way too fast and it's hurting my throat. But we're at almost 35 minutes. I'm trying to go faster, and it's still 35 minutes in. I'm sorry, guys. I don't think I have the capabilities of doing less than a 45-minute video. So, I've said once upon a time that I kind of feel like Mr. Perfect from Ram Treasures will always be not a top echelon figure from them, but an upper class figure. So, you will never see this figure in the top 10. Now, with the addition of more and more figures, you could potentially see this figure fall further and further and further down the list. But generally, if you see this figure somewhere in like the top 12, top 15, you consider that to be a good placement for the figure overall. And one of the things that has always bothered me is you have Mr. Mr. Perfect, right? So why don't you create Galoob 2-up of Scott Steiner? It's literally the exact same figure, exact same pose, same body. Even got the singlet, right? All you gotta do is change out the head. In fact, heck, paint this head black, repaint the singlet yellow and black, and call it Scott Steiner. I don't think anybody's going to be focusing too much on the face anyways, so at the end of the day, who cares? But kind of talk about the Scott Steiner Galoob figure now. Yeah, we had Galoob Steiner Brothers, and we used them. I would say that Scott Steiner Galoob was a very utilized figure as a kid, and I don't think I really had a problem with it as a kid, but I really have a problem with it as an adult. And I think I didn't have a problem with it as a kid because, well, among Galoob figures, Galoob really didn't produce a lot of great figures. So if you think of Scott Steiner as being like an average figure, you know, for Galoob, that's pretty reasonable. And Ram Treasures, because this was still a very early figure, the rubber on it is not the best. But you're not sitting there like, you know, pulling on the rubber and expecting it to rip or anything like that. So the color of the skin could be done a little bit differently. I think the rubber could be a little bit stronger, sure. But overall, I still think that the Mr. Perfect is a solid figure. And like I said, this is probably a number 12 figure, number 14 figure. And that was probably back when there were maybe 30 figures from Ram Treasures. I don't think I've made any type of my favorite listing, you know, 1 through 30, or put them in order 1 through 30 of, you know, how I look at the figures. Because once they kept expanding more and more, it just became too long. Like the last one I made, 1 through 30, was like an hour-long video. And if you were to do 35, 40, you know, for every five figures, make a new video like that, it's gonna become longer and longer. So if I were to make a video today with like 65 plus figures or however many there are, you're looking at like maybe a 2.5 hour video. With the way I talk about the figures, absolutely 2.5 hours. Now, if I knew that somebody was actually going to watch the video, like a lot of somebody's, like that video would get over 1,000 views, I would make a 2.5 hour video talking about all the Ram Treasure figures. But it's just that I don't want to make a 2-hour video and only have maybe 10 people watch it, or maybe have 150 people tune in for like 20 minutes and then turn it off type of deal, because it wouldn't make no sense. So based on what's on the shelf right now, I don't even know if Mr. Perfect is even a top 20 figure anymore. Maybe not even a top 25. It doesn't mean that it's a bad figure. It just means that there are a lot of really awesome figures from Ram Treasures. And really poor ones, I mean, there's probably a handful of figures I really look at, but I say like they're like really poor. Or I feel like could have been done a whole lot better, whether it's bad rubber or bad play pose, or maybe it's too generic type of deal or something like that. But that, like I said, there's only maybe 3 to 5 figures that are like that. Rubber, you could live with that. I do believe that this is the last Rick Martel in this tournament. And even though I think that Rick Martel is a quality figure, regardless of which Rick Martel you're looking at, you could be looking at the Rick Martel that's customized to look like a 1-2-3 Kid that we saw in the last video. You can look at original Strike Force Rick Martel. You could look at any of my Rick Martel customs. I think any one of those figures are legitimate round 4 to round 5 figures. But oddly enough, kind of looking at Mr. Perfect right now, I'm kind of leaning towards Mr. Perfect. At least with the dual singlet, that really helps. I really love dual colors, you guys know. The fact that the Rick Martel figure is in all blue trunks, knee pads, boots, that I don't remember him in any of that. Obviously, I remember him in all pink. That's it. That's the Rick Martel I can remember. Or I think about Series 5 Hasbro. Pink and white Rick Martel, right? It's AWA days. I don't remember that. And with this, like, and this is sometimes where you look at it, you think sometimes the accessories are too much. Like the, what do you call it? The preppy sweater wrapped around your neck type of deal. I don't know. AWA World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion. Alright, guys. I am going to go with Rick Martel on this one. Cough medicine or something. Rick Martel defeats Mr. Perfect. So, these last 2 matches with Rick Martel, both of these were very close. And to be honest, Rick Martel almost went 0 for 2 in this video. And he could have very well been 0 for 2 because he could have been 2-0. Because both of the figures are great figures, but I know that Mr. Perfect does not win this tournament. I know this Rick Martel doesn't win this tournament, but I know that he does give you a better opportunity for advancement. That Mr. Perfect could make it to round 3 and be eliminated, where this one still could make it to round 4, round 5. So you gotta push for the figures that you know have a more legitimate chance to push forward even further into the tournament. So for that particular matchup, yes, Mr. Perfect was the best option. So guys, that does conclude round 2, episode 2. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, goodbye, everybody.